Hello. Today we're going to talk about dividing complex numbers. So there's a few things that are going on when we divide complex numbers. First of all, this is again all about division, right? So when we divide, we want to make sure that we simplify when possible. And we're going to have some problems where we're dividing by an imaginary number. In other words, that imaginary number is in the denominator. So when that happens, and it's a single I, you're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by I. You'll see what I mean when we get there. Again, remember that I squared is -1. And then you're going to be seeing problems where we're dividing by a plus bi, and we're dividing a purely imaginary number. So what we're going to do, again, is multiply the numerator and denominator by I. We're going to distribute the I to both terms in the numerator, and then we're going to simplify to make sure that we write the real part as a fraction and the imaginary part as a fraction. And all of this will come clearer as we do our examples. When dividing by a plus bi, you're going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by the complex conjugate to eliminate the imaginary number from the denominator. We don't want imaginary numbers in the denominator at all. Distribute when necessary and simplify, and again, make sure you write your real number part as a fraction and your imaginary part as a fraction. So let's go ahead and get into it. So this first problem has to do with this first bullet, or second bullet rather. So I've got -2i divided by I. We're asked to simplify and write our answer in the form of a plus bi and to reduce all fractions. So when I do this, I'm going to multiply by I over I. And when I do that, what happens is I end up with -2i squared over I squared. Now, actually, I'm going to do this two ways. So if we do that, then what happens here is I've got -2 multiplied by -1, because remember, I squared is -1. That gives us 2. I squared, again, is -1. So I end up with the answer of -2. Now, here's the deal. Couldn't I have just said -2i divided by I is just -2? Sure, I could have, because any number divided by itself, or any part of that divided by itself, eliminates or reduces to 1. So I could just say that's -2. Either way would have been fine. I'm assuming that you'll probably like this way better though. So now let's go ahead and do the second problem that we have here. Now this time, I don't just have I, right? And I don't have an I in the numerator. So in this case, we are going to multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. And that gives me 1i divided by 8i squared. Okay, well, I still have 1i, and I know that I squared is -1, so -1 times 8 is -8. So how you would write this in IXL is 1 over -8 and put the I out to the side. And that's how you would complete that one. We're going to do this again. So we're simplifying here. And we have -1 minus 2i divided by -5i. Well, now we're going to use the second bullet, or third, or fourth. I keep getting the numbers mixed up, right? The fourth bullet. So we are going to again multiply the numerator and the denominator by I. So what you can do at this point, this division bar, anything above it is grouped together. So I'm going to put parentheses around it to tell myself, make sure you distribute. So I've got I multiplied by -1 is -1I. I multiplied by -2I would be -2I squared. And then in the denominator, I've got -5I multiplied by I, which gives me -5I squared. Now we're not done because we've got to simplify this, right? So I'm going to continue. I think I'll continue below it. Hopefully I have enough room. So I've got -1I. Well, -2 times -1 is +2. And -5 times -1 is +5. Now you would think, oh, go ahead and just leave it this way. But first of all, they ask us to write this in the form of a plus bi, so we've got to change the order of it. Secondly, remember I said, make sure to write the real part as a fraction and the imaginary part as a fraction. So instead, we're going to write this way. 2 over 5 minus 1I over 5. This would be the correct way to write it. All right, let's move on. So this time we've got 1 divided by -1 minus 4I. So we're going to multiply by -1 minus 4I. -1 minus 4I. And actually, no, I should be multiplying this by the conjugate, right? Because I said when dividing by a plus bi, we multiply by the conjugate. So instead, the real number parts stay the same. I'm going to change the sign of the imaginary part, because the only way to get rid of that is to have opposite signs here. So on the top, well, 1 times any term or any set of terms is just that term. So we've got -1 plus 4I in the numerator. Now in the denominator, we're going to have to go ahead and do distributive property. So -1 times -1 is +1. -1 times +4i is -4i. -4i times -1 is +4i. And I'm running out of room. -4i times +4i is negative. I'm going to have to write it here. I hate to do this to you guys. You know what? This is what we're going to do. I'm going to rewrite this down here. So let's cross through this and put it below. How about that? That'll give us more room, and hopefully it'll keep you from getting confused on what numbers go where. So we said this was 1 plus 4i minus, I did that backwards, didn't it? -1, -1 is +1, -1 minus 4. Okay, so make this a minus, and then -4i times -1 is +4i. There we go. I knew I'd get it together. -4 times +4 is -16, and I times I is I squared. I think that's much better. So let's go ahead and simplify this. So what you notice is -4i and +4i, they eliminate each other. So I'm just going to mark through them. As so. And I'm left with 1 plus 4i divided by, well, 1 minus 16i squared. Well, I squared is negative 1, right? So really what I've got is 1 plus 16. And I'll explain it again. 1, and then this was minus 16i squared. I squared is negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 16 is positive 16. That's how I'm getting this value here. So we know that is 17, correct? Yes. So instead, this becomes, let me put an arrow here, 1 over 17, and plus 16 is 17, plus 4i over 17. There we go. All right, let's move on. We've got 2 divided by negative 5 minus 4i, and we're going to multiply by the conjugate of this, so it's negative 5 plus 4i divided by negative 5 plus 4i. I know I'm going to have to distribute here. So this gives me negative 10 plus 8i in the numerator. And in the denominator, I have negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Negative 5 times positive 4i is negative 20i. Negative 4i times negative 5 is positive 20i. And negative 4i times positive 4i is negative 16i squared. So let's go ahead and simplify. We've still got negative 10 plus 8i. What we know is negative 20i plus 20i. They have the same coefficient but opposite signs, so they eliminate each other. And we're left with 25 minus 16i squared. Well, we know what that is, don't we? So I'm going to do negative 10 plus 8i, and I think I have room to write what this should be, so I will. 25, I squared is negative 1, so negative 1 times negative 16 is positive 16, and here's our answer down here. It's going to be negative 10 over 41 plus 8i over 41. All right, so that is that one, and we are going to go ahead and look at our last one. Okay, so this time we've got 7 plus 7i divided by 1 plus I. Again, we're going to multiply by the conjugate, which would be 1 minus I. And this time we're going to have to do our distributive property on or in the numerator and the denominator. So let's go ahead and do that. We've got 7 times 1, which is 7. 7 times negative I, which is negative 7i. 7i times 1 is positive 7i. And then 7i times negative 7i is negative 7i squared. Let's do the bottom. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative I is negative I. Positive I times positive 1 is positive I. And then I times negative I is negative I squared. So now we're going to begin to clean this up a little bit. Well, if you notice here, we've got 7. Well, negative 7i and positive 7i, they actually eliminate each other, right? So we're just going to take them out. And then we have here negative I and positive I eliminate each other. So now what's left is 7 minus 7I squared divided by 1 minus I squared. Let's simplify that even more. Well, 7 minus 7I squared, we know I squared is negative 1. So really what's happening is negative 1 times negative 7 is positive 7. And here we have negative or let's just say I squared is negative 1, right? Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So this actually becomes 1 plus 1. This equals to 14 divided by 2. And together that would be 7. Now, remember, they're asking us to write this in the form of a plus bi. So we're going to write this as 7 plus 0i. You do have your turn on the next page. Go ahead and complete that, and we'll come back with the answers. All right, so here's your turn completed. There are a lot of steps, and I understand that. So please take your time. I would really rather you be slow and right than fast and wrong. So take your time, ask questions if you need to, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.